Welcome to the podcast, where we teach you how to create marketing that pops. Get ready for refreshing conversations with industry experts, trendsetters, and creative minds that'll leave you bubbling with inspiration. Get ready to turn up the volume on your business. Let's get popping. Okay, welcome back to Marketing That Pops. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Michelle.
And today we are joined by Katherine Golden. We have a special episode for you guys today. She is a registered nurse with over 28 years in the medical field and a leading voice in cannabis nursing for the past 8 years. As the CEO, Executive Director, and founder of Leaf411, she has been on a mission to educate and guide patients and healthcare professionals alike. With multiple cannabis nursing certificates and a long list of leadership roles in the industry, Katherine is here to break down the science and the stigma of cannabis medicine. So welcome to the pod.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm really honored to be here and so happy I get to talk to your audience.
Thank you. You have a lot of credentials under your belt, ma'am.
Yes, they pile up over the years. You know, once you get started, you start seeing where your heart takes you and you start becoming an advocate kind of deeper and deeper and finding the little, other kind of responsibilities that you're willing to take on, and see where you can be of most value. So yes, thank you. I appreciate it. I try to keep my fingers in a lot of things.
Yeah. As I was writing that, I was like, man, this is a lot. So I love that though. So on every episode, I was just telling you this, on every episode, we have this section in our podcast where we ask our guests to debunk a myth. And this episode is it's no different. And so today, your myth is, what are your thoughts on when there's stigma around overdose of cannabis? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I like to explain to people is, making sure we have the right terminology for overdose. What is an overdose? Do you mean you just overused? Basically, they're talking about THC for that one time. Are they using it chronically and irresponsibly to where they're overusing it every day, all day? So, so I try to figure out first, understanding what that term means to them and what are they trying to understand. Because we all know, well, I'm sorry, not we all know, but most of us in cannabis therapeutics will understand that there's very few receptors in the brainstem. So you cannot have respiratory depression like you can have with an opioid. So if you use the word overdose, typically that's a negative connotation because it means you overdosed on a narcotic, which caused near death. Cannabis cannot do that. So that's the huge safety profile around cannabis, is because there are those very few receptors in the brainstem that cannot cause that, is why we, kind of dig a little deeper to what somebody means by overdose. So typically we will find out that overdose means that someone's just over consuming, meaning do they really need it to use 24/7 for their symptom relief? And if so, are they using it effectively? And that's when we start as a nurse organization through Leaf411, that's when we start kind of diving a little deeper and finding out, are they using it ideally? If not, do they need a tolerance break? And we can go into all of that explanation. But, to directly answer your question, overdose, it's not usually a term that's used in cannabis because it typically means near death and that person has not experienced it, even though you will feel like you're going to die when you take too much cannabis. And that's what drives people to the emergency room, because they don't know that you cannot have respiratory depression. You cannot have sudden cardiac arrest. So because of those things, they'll run to the emergency room. And that's where we want to educate them more about, okay, this is what you need to do if you've overconsumed.
Right. Yeah, I know that there's so much surrounding that topic, and I think that's a lot of the reason why people have that stigma really about it of, well, I don't want to, overdose in terms. So I love that
Mhm.
you're able to speak on that, and yes, there should definitely be more education surrounding that as a whole and using the right terminology.
Yeah. Do you also get people that may wonder or ask you, can I be addicted to it?
Mm.
Um, Compared to like other type of drugs, natural
Right.
drugs.
Yeah. Addiction is very real. I mean, addiction manifests in a bunch of different ways. And that's where you have to, again, understand the terminology someone's using,
Mhm.
addiction versus overuse versus, what are they feeling that they want to make sure they don't um, either become dependent, which is
Mhm.
different from addiction. And that's where people
Mhm.
get mixed up. So
Mhm.
people will become dependent on cannabis because they use it for symptom relief. But is that an addiction, quote unquote addiction, that ruins your daily life, that makes you
Mhm.
seek it out, even though it's a detriment to your activities of daily living?
Mhm.
Losing financial stability because of it. Things like, there's all kinds of other check marks for addiction versus dependence. So it's defining those differently and understanding them, and then asking the person who asked the question, well, where is their fear? So yes,
Mhm.
it can absolutely become an addiction if you're consuming it irresponsibly. So if you're consuming it when you do not need it, when you're spending money on it that you do not have because
Mhm.
you're using it too frequently, and it's just education is much more you need it really to start to adjust your use. So it's really asking them, where their fear lies, and their fear is typically, like you said, Michelle, is this going to be something I can't get away from? Like
Mhm.
we think of that narcotic addiction where gosh, you see in the news, the robberies that happen
Yeah.
because they're trying to break into a pharmacy to get that drug, things like that. They've ruined their marriages, they've ruined their relationships with their family members. That's addiction. So anything can be an addiction. You can have food, you could have exercise, you can have anything that's an unhealthy um, consumption or addiction. Same thing can happen with cannabis. It's very seldom because typically it's more dependence that happens because people are using it and need it and don't want to stop it because it helps their pain, because it
Mhm.
is helping something. But addiction can happen. And that's where we talk to people about their intention of using it and try to figure it out if, there is need for addiction treatment.
Yes.
Cool.
So I'd love to hear more about your role as a cannabis nurse, and would you break it down for us? Like, what does a cannabis nurse actually do?
A good question. Because a lot of people still don't understand that there are cannabis trained nurses, doctors, nurse
Yeah.
practitioners, PA, pharmacists. I mean, so it's been recognized as a true specialty in the nursing world. So we
Mhm.
got that recognition, I want to say about 2 years ago. And so it is our responsibility as a registered nurse to understand cannabis therapeutics, because now the majority of patients across the country are consuming, whether it is a legal product, a non-legal product, a hemp product, a dispensary product. There's just so much
Mhm.
access to parts of this plant that we have to, now there's responsibility to understand its use and its use in the body. So a cannabis nurse is trained in cannabis therapeutics, meaning we've taken their appropriate education to understand pharmacokinetics, how it happens as a drug, if you will, in the body, how the body responds to it, our system in the body. A lot of people are starting to hear that we have this new system called the endocannabinoid system.
Mm.
We educate to that, gosh, did you know that in the 90s they discovered this, and it is the umbrella that's over all our 11 other systems in our body? And who would have known that this is our master regulator system?
Right.
So that's what a cannabis nurse understands and has knowledge and expertise, and then can also be that patient care advocate. And I think that that's where we blend nicely. We're an educator at heart. We're an educator. As a registered nurse, that's our main responsibility is education.
Mhm.
So we're not prescribers. That's an advanced practice nurse. You're talking a nurse practitioner or an MD. They prescribe, give dosing, and so forth. A registered nurse, to work within our scope of practice, educates, provides resources, can titrate up and down and say, wow, you're consuming what I think could be excessive to what the symptom you're trying to treat. So let's turn that down a little bit. Let's reduce your milligrams you're using. So nurse can come in and do those types of things. When someone needs the hand-holding of day-to-day care, exact dosing, take this, capsule twice a day, and report to me tomorrow. That's an advanced practice nurse, a nurse practitioner, or an MD.
Okay. Thank you. What are some common misconceptions that you might get around like cannabis in the healthcare?
Misconceptions about cannabis in healthcare. I think that most patients in healthcare feel like they need to be high. They still think that because I'm going to use cannabis, there's some level of impairment. And even if they think even if it could be a small level of impairment, there's fear of that. So I think that is what holds a lot of people back, is they still think that you have to have some level of impairment to have the medicinal benefits of cannabis. That's what we're working through. And I think that as, much as microdoses are now the hot, tagline and, words that are used for the medical community, I think that they've embraced that, because that at least alleviates some fear that, okay, if they're small doses, then maybe I don't have to have impairment. And so we speak to that a lot for the traditional healthcare market, is that impairment is not something that we work towards or focus on unless that's something that you need for a specific ailment. When somebody is in around the clock pain, chronic pain, well, they need some slight forgetfulness of that pain cycle that's happening. They want to breathe from it. They want to break from it. That's why it's so beautiful for PTSD patients, because they won't forget. So a lot of people, you'll read it in the headlines, even recently, like how, the latest research shows that THC is concerning because it slows down your short-term memory, or it messes with your short-term memory. Well, that's actually a benefit for PTSD patients. That's how a lot of patients are able to sleep without waking up and having those vivid nightmares and those thoughts that prevent them from falling asleep, because the mind starts chattering. So you need a bit of forgetfulness, or else you become unhealthy. So that's what, we try to teach the traditional healthcare patient surrounding their fear of integrating cannabis.
Okay. So how did you get in? What was the idea that came about for Leaf411, and how did that get started?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question to ask anyone and everyone that steps into this cannabis arena, because especially for a healthcare practitioner, because typically there's a personal story behind it, and mine was very much the same. I was very anti-cannabis. It didn't work for me as in my youth. I believed all the stigma surrounding it, the propaganda that it was just for lazy people. There was no medicinal benefit. It was no good. There's no benefit to it. I believed all that, especially being a licensed registered nurse. I thought, well, we would know if there was some validity to this. So then 8 years ago, my brother-in-law was suddenly diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, given 2 to 5 years to live. Niece and nephew still in high school. My family's devastated. He was a non-smoker, so it just came out of nowhere. I had voted against its adult use in Colorado because I believed everything, all the propaganda. And then I thought, you know what, since it's big here in Colorado, let me look into it because one of the researchers in California said, we look at cannabis, but as a last ditch effort because we know nothing about it. So I said, let me take that off your plate and let me look into the science behind that because it's such a big deal here in Colorado. When I looked into it, into our regular platforms that any licensed professional looks at, especially like the National Institutes of Health, Public Med, Science Direct, when you look at all that, you see how many scientific papers have actually been published, peer-reviewed studies, and a lot of them are lab and animal, but they're out there showing promise. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this exists. Let's start looking at the number one clinician. Let's start getting them answers. And that's where I thought, well, you know, not everyone can have a nurse in their pocket like my sister has me in her pocket. You know, they can say, here's all the information. And it got me onto my journey of self-educating myself as a licensed professional. I started working in the field. And then I thought, wow, you know, here I am working in a very affluent city in Colorado. And I saw people coming in that still couldn't afford the out-of-pocket doctor cost to even ask, is cannabis effective for me? Or could I integrate it? The out-of-pocket cost for the medicine. So here you have two out-of-pocket costs that they weren't used to. And I thought, you know what? I want to make sure I have a tool out there, a public education tool that is free or extremely low cost that anybody could access, a licensed professional to say, hey, can I safely use cannabis? And that's how it all started. And that was 8 years ago. Well, Leaf411 has been live for six years. The hotline went live 6 years ago. I took a year to put it together because I wanted to make sure all the regulating bodies, you know, were agreeing that I could advertise and all of that in dispensaries. And then I'm happy to say that my brother-in-law is still as healthy as can be.
Oh, wow.
He integrated cannabis. Yes. Still
That's
on
amazing.
cannabis. Yes. And he met, because I knew, you know, I started learning as fast and furious as I could about this field. I knew to take him to the number one clinician in California, which is Dr. Bonnie Goldstein. And right away, you know, started following a cannabis regimen that he's on today. And 8 years, we're still good.
Wow, that's awesome. So do you think, did he happen to do chemotherapy? Like, is this like instead of chemotherapy what he did, or?
That's a great question. So no, so actually, I wanted him to get started on cannabis right away, but he got in a study that had a gene therapy drug, and because he did not want to do chemotherapy, so he did a gene therapy drug, a targeted drug with immunotherapy. Immunotherapy did not work for him. It caused a liver failure both times he tried it. So he got kicked out of the study, and that's when he could use cannabis because he was no longer in a study. So this drug that he's on was supposed to only last, I think, 12 to 16 months. And he's 8 years and still on the same drug. And Dr. Goldstein said it's because of cannabis. And even his the researcher that follows him at UCI said, wow, there's no reason this should be working still. So, but they still haven't taken the steps to look into cannabis. So.
Oh, yeah. Because I feel like my dad had cancer, my mother-in-law had cancer, and once they started either radiation or chemo, I just feel like it just went worse. It got worse, and I wonder if, you know, they would have done cannabis instead, would that have made a difference?
Yeah, what we try to teach people is that you always want it as adjunct therapy, which is combination. You never want to throw out the traditional and just put in the alternative. Unless for some reason that traditional is not working, has not worked, is ineffective, fine, then you can try that as a standalone, but we never suggest that. You should always integrate it together. It actually helps when they work together. It works even better because usually, typically, you can reduce those chemotherapy drug doses so you have fewer side effects, but you're still using chemotherapy while you're introducing cannabinoid therapy. So it's actually more beautiful together.
Okay, good to know.
When you were starting this business, I know you said you had to go through a process and to see if you could even, you know, market it. What were some of those marketing strategies that you were able to do?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's the hard part because we
Yeah.
are grassroots, bootstrapped. I mean, I could use every word to describe how, the small but mighty team is like what I like to say. Small but mighty
Right.
team. So everything that we do, in order for us to have funding to do anything, we have to, it's either going to the industry, where we go to my first funding funnels to try to pay for or afford a marketing plan was to go to the industry and say, well, of course the industry is going to want to, support a nonprofit, right? And donate so that way they can have a well-informed consumer purchasing their products. That's not the case for most, unfortunately, but we found the few and far between. So, any advertising we've done, it has been through those support partners. So any dispensary or manufacturer that supports us, they will actually leverage that support and they will scream to their community like, hey, we support this nonprofit to ensure you have access to a registered nurse to ask your questions. So that way you are buying the correct products from us and using them effectively. And we love that. So that's kind of what our marketing has been, is word of mouth, industry, really leveraging, their support to us. And even we get a lot of industry people that will send their customers to us, but will not support. So that's what we try to convert. We have individual giving, which we love. We have people that just adore the service, see value in the service, so they'll give. And so that's that word of mouth from them for advertising, reviews and social media, of course. Like we're doing podcasts and I've done radio interviews, and I just do as much as I can that we can afford, really.
Yeah. Anything to keep people top of mind is what we always like to say.
Right.
I was going to ask you about social media, because you're educating kind of like the community, in a sense. Have you run into any issues with Meta or anything like that? That's always a problem that we have in the cannabis industry, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I have not had the opportunity to actually advertise on Meta. If I could afford that, then yes, I would try it. The only one that I had issues with is because I'm a nonprofit, I get Google. I'm supposed to be able to get Google grant money, which is about $10,000 a month that you can get in Google ad grants for a nonprofit. It is very robust, but they line you up with a mentor, with a team. These students came in, they're like, this is amazing. And I said, it's amazing until you try to push it through. And that's where the stops come. Like, oh, this is cannabis. This is cannabis. I'm like, but we don't touch the plant at all. We just educate, and we're licensed professionals. Nope, doesn't matter. You say the word cannabis, you have a cannabis leaf on your website. So we've even tried to kind of change it a little bit, because we do talk about hemp products, which are federally legal. I've emailed many times to different platforms saying, because there are also payment processing platforms that will not allow you, because they say the same thing. And I've told them, we do not touch the plants. We just educate. And we've tried to change it to just CBD guidance, and that's federally legal. And they say, no, not a chance. So it's very hard.
I think I told you about my issue I had with our bank. How they gave us like 3 weeks to find a new bank and a line of credit, and I mean, it's like, what? But we don't sell cannabis. We are a marketing agency. We just happen to help our clients, in that area. But yeah, so it's crazy. You really have to be careful.
Yes, you do. So
far,
I've
even had prospects that won't even talk to us because they disagree with it, which is fine. I mean, that's fine. But it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is. Luckily, we can stay on the few platforms that still allow us, but you still have to be very careful. I mean, you see it all the time in other people's feeds that they've been kicked out of some block somewhere. So
yeah. And luckily there's a lot of banks now that are getting approved for that. And so that's nice, because it didn't used to be that way. It was really hard to find a bank that would do that. So now there's a lot of them out there.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, let me make sure I'm not missing my spot. Had it marked here.
I like to get Olivia off track.
That's all right.
Oh, I kind of just wanted to compliment you about the being able to work with the dispensaries, because I think that is honestly just perfectly aligned. And, I would hope that more dispensaries would like to jump on that, because they have you right there. It's such a great resource.
You would think that, but the bigger, the mom and pop dispensaries in the beginning, back in the day, were all about, yes, we want this resource.
Yeah.
The bud tenders were thankful they had us as a resource, because they didn't have to take that responsibility on their shoulders. They could just say, oh, call, here's a business card, go out in the front and call Leaf411 and ask them what you need. And then they'll come back and buy the correct product. But as those dispensaries go by the wayside, and now we have the MSOs, the larger corporations, they will say, we take care of education in-house. So we've got enough. And that's where it kind of lacks, and we actually have more manufacturers that support this public education than dispensaries.
Okay. Yeah. Where do you kind of see the industry going in the next couple of years as we are trying to educate? I mean, that's what all these podcasts are all about, is to kind of like help with stigma, and also to give people just a voice to talk and tell people about what it is that they're doing. But where do you kind of see the future going?
Well, it's hard, because if you read the news, you become depressed at what you think the industry, where the industry is pointing. It seems like it's going backwards. But then if you actually are in it, like I am, the things that we've got going, like you said, I've got a lot of different things that I'm involved with other than Leaf411. I work as a cannabis consultant for the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment in the work comp division, who has been trying to show that we could get medical cannabis covered for patients. So that's what some states, and by being in this the last couple of years, I've heard that other states have actually covered medical cannabis for patients who choose to have medical cannabis instead of an opioid or an alternative pain management. So they're really trying to focus on what the patient needs and getting away from some more of those harmful pharmaceuticals with those harmful side effects, if they can incorporate something that has a much higher safety profile. Another project that we've been in a few. So we're in a dementia caregiver partnership with one of the brands that supports us. That is fascinating. We've been doing this for since last year. 75% of dementia patients are cared for in the home, because they can't afford putting them in a facility. I mean, if you look at those prices,
they're astronomical.
$7,000 to $10,000 a month to have someone in a facility. So they're cared for in the home, and so that's a lot of responsibility on that loved one. So we've been working with the dementia patients and their caregivers at home to integrate cannabis, because they can make the decision. It's not going really through a facility, which is much easier. So that's been hugely successful. We are in the oncology space this year, and there's facilities that know that the oncology patient is consuming cannabis, and now realizing, hey, we need to make sure they are using it safely and effectively. Let's get some patient education to them. So we're seeing it turning actually a corner in traditional medical care, which is phenomenal. We have calls that come in through us. We ask, how did you hear about us? Kaiser, some of these really big healthcare facilities are actually referring people to us. So we're just starting to see that there's more openness in the traditional healthcare setting. And so when you look at it that way, and it's like, wow, okay, now we're seeing medical coverage for cannabis is happening. Traditional healthcare facilities are having new medical cannabis committees formed to get patient education. When you're just looking at that, you're thinking, oh my gosh, like you said, what's going to happen in 2 years? It's going to explode in the traditional setting. But then you see the other side and you're like, wait a minute, there's states that are reversing some of their access. So, I don't know where it's going to, what's going to happen. And then you look at the scheduling, rescheduling, descheduling, and you just kind of wait and see.
Yeah. I wonder what the perspective of the pharmaceutical companies are regarding it. Like, are they, because it could take away a lot of their business, So like, are they not supportive of it? It sounds like maybe that some of them are, if they're really trying to work with you on that. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because when you think about it, whatever symptom you have, there's probably a strain that would help you, instead of having to go through your like prescription, coverage and things like that.
I think the pharmaceutical companies are probably every day working on it. There was I read an article about a week or two ago about a pharmaceutical company saying that they have a drug that works like cannabis does on the system. So, there's evolution happening. We have Marinol, Dronabinol. We've had it since, I want to say, the 80s, which is THC compound, synthetic. It doesn't work as well because it's not the full plant. So pharmaceutical companies have known about it, have tried, and I'm sure they're working on something right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Definitely.
So how can people find you on the internet? What's the best way that people can learn more? If they have more questions, if they want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Yes, so anyone can go to leaf411.org. That's leaf411.org. We're a nonprofit. They can go there. There's a big white button on the front page that says, click here to schedule a call. It's very easy. We ask for a $35 donation for a scheduled nurse call, which we try to make it as affordable as a copayment. So $35 for a 30-minute nurse call, $25 for any follow-up calls. But if someone is having a financial hardship, we say just call us on our free 800 number, 844-LEAF411. Tell us that, you can't do that right now. That's no problem. We turn no one away. We talk to everyone. So we just put them in the queue. We have scheduled calls. We have hotline calls we return. We want to talk to everybody. So no one is ever turned away. We have a chat feature on our homepage. It's open 24/7. It will guide you to those scheduling resources. We see all those questions every day. We answer them in the email. You can go to our social media handles. We're on X, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and it's Leaf411.org. So try to keep it as simple as possible. LEAF 411. Oh, there it is. 411.org. And that's how you find us. So I try to make it as easy as possible and to make sure that everyone knows that even if you struggle to make a donation, not a problem. Just let us know on our hotline number and we'll call you back.
I love that.
Awesome.
Very accessible.
I like the name too, because everybody knows what 411 means, getting more information.
You put your marketing hat on for that one.
Yeah, no, I get questions about that because
really?
So when I first started this, I had a co-founder, gosh, at the time, 7 years ago now, and she was, I think she was considered a millennial. I think she always said she was on the cusp. But anyway, she was worried that 411, well, the younger you are, the less you'll know what 411 means, because we all know it means information from back in the day. And then there was always her concerns about, well, you should start with an app. So I went really old school. I went Leaf411, hoping that people will know that 411 needs information or learn that. And then I went with a 800 number because I thought, you know what? What about the people that don't have smartphones? I want, we've received calls from the unhoused, from farmers. Literally within the first year, I had a farmer who could only get service out in his field on his tractor and called us and said, I have a question about cannabis. You couldn't have that. I mean, he didn't have a smartphone, so he just had a just simple, dial phone that he could, cell phone that he could take out there. So that's what I started with. But hopefully as the years progress, we start opening up our, avenues of communication and have ways you can get a hold of us. So, but thank you for the name. I mean, we tried to make it.
Well, we know.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Thanks for listening with us today. Stay tuned for the latest in web marketing and design from ThrivePop. Want to be a pop star? Head over to thrivepop.com/podcast to join our mailing list for episode notifications, sneak peeks, listener feedback, and more.